So with all that said, just a quick round of introductions. I guess probably the most efficient way to do things, Lou and Peter, is I'll introduce myself at this point and set the stage, and then I'll leave it up to you, gents, to introduce yourselves at the beginning of each of your segments in a bit more detail than I'm about to do here. So for many of you on the phone, you probably know Kerrco Automation fairly well, and you might even know myself. I'm Sean Robinson, the Software Solutions Manager for Kerrco Automation. Joining us today, we have Peter Price, the founder and CEO of Webalo, and Lou Roth, the VP Business Development. We're very pleased to have them on board with us. Over the last few years, you've seen a lot of changes in GE's software portfolio, and you probably noticed that Kerrco has also been making some very careful changes and additions here and there to some of the partners that we bring on board to supplement that core GE suite. And we're very proud to have recently formalized an arrangement with Webalo because we think that they will bring to us capability around visualization of data, reporting and mobilization of data and information that lays very nicely alongside the core suite of products that we're all familiar with. So I think what I'll do is, rather than take up too much time, there are a couple of things I'd like to do just to get everybody in the right frame of mind, and then I will pass things over to Peter, who will give you guys a good overview of Webalo and their roots and where they're coming from and the mission that they're on. And from there, I think we'll see a handoff over to Lou, who will go in a bit more into depth into the technology suite and give us some examples of how the technology works. So for my part, I guess, for me, one of the things that I found interesting and exciting about Webalo really has an awful lot to do with what's good and bad about the heritage of trying to turn the sorts of volumes and types of data that we generate in the industrial space into actionable insight. And so I couldn't help myself as we sat down and put together the content for the webinar. I just wanted to get everybody thinking about where we've come from. Right, if you go back about 30 years ago, the way that we went after trying to understand how a process was performing or where there might be opportunities to tune a piece of equipment, we had pretty crude methods. We pulled data out of a control system and we dropped it into Lotus 123. I'm sure at least some of you on the phone are old enough to remember that. And it was a pretty clunky way of working. And of course, things have changed. The nature of what we put out to deliver processing power in a factory or beside a high-value asset or process has changed significantly. But it would probably be fair to say that one of the areas where, making use of operational data has lagged many other sectors is that other than being on a slightly newer technology platform with slightly more exciting capabilities, too often our attempts to use that operational data to make something work better or to find an opportunity to change the way we run our business comes back to some fairly old-fashioned manual techniques of dumping data out into a spreadsheet and just making it look prettier than we could back in 1985. So when we think about that, other things haven't really stayed still. The definition of what people want to do with their operational data is different. The nature of how they want to put it to work alongside other systems is different. And so what we find now is that the challenge is not so much a question of, what does reporting on top of a particular asset or process look like. It's more a question of what does it mean to be able to extract insight in a meaningful way and deliver that to the different people who may need it. And in many cases, different people who need to look at what's essentially, in many cases, the same underlying information, but packaged and presented differently because they're trying to serve different needs and different business processes. And there are a few areas that, all kidding aside, we can still run into some challenges along the way as technology providers, either as a product or as delivering a project. And the first of which is that, nowadays I think we find that the problems are becoming a bit more complex. The fundamental engineering of an asset or a process or the flow in a factory has been pretty well thought through. And so nowadays what we're trying to do is to find those hidden relationships and those hidden understandings that allow us to find that, extra couple of % of capability here and there, whether that's relating to process performance or reliability or what have you. And that in turn means that more often than not, we're not so much trying to look at, a single source of data and understand what truth may come out of it or to look at a single source of data and drive a conclusion or drive an action as a result of it. Nowadays what we're talking about is trying to put somebody in a position where the role that they execute, whether that's in continuous improvement, whether that's in operations management, whether that's in engineering and troubleshooting, is served with information from all of the right places that might be relevant to that role or to that function in a way that's useful to them at that moment. And that gives us challenges because that means that we're talking about not just a matter of, connectivity to an easy-to-get-to single source, whether that's OPC from a control system or via ODBC to a more database-driven system. It's often a question of looking at combining and developing into a composite kind of view information that has to be accessed using different technologies. That may be a question of crossing different system boundaries, and that can bring into a question matters of geography, distance, networking, and security. So that variety of data sources is partly about, the function and structure and the meaning of the data, but it's also about the mechanics, and that introduces its own challenges. And then finally, we have to consider that, again, in abandoning the word reporting and thinking more about delivering that information or delivering insight, how we package it up is something that we have to think about more carefully. Because if in some cases, if what I'm trying to do is simply to enable somebody to think deeper, stronger thoughts about a process, then some of the traditional approaches may make sense. In other cases, it may be that a fairly complex range of data needs to be accessed and processed, but that what comes out the other end may be more of a prompt than what we might have considered to be a report or a visualization in more traditional times. And what that really means is, and where Kerrco became very excited about Webalo is that it's a toolkit that lets us step away from thinking about data and reporting as something that's system-centric, and instead, more to the point in the blue bar along the bottom of this screen, it's a tool that we see as allowing us to look at each of the solutions that we've traditionally provided alongside the other things that are typically in place with our customers, be that an ERP system, a maintenance management system, or a field service management system. And Webalo puts us in a position where we can begin to think about delivering capabilities on a user-based or user-focused or role-focused basis, instead of thinking traditionally about extracting data from a system and trying to find a way to make that system-centric view useful. And the killer app aspect of Webalo for us was frankly how nicely it bridges that gap between what we might think of as the traditional transactional-based systems, the sorts of things that typically are sitting on top of a relational database management system of some kind, whether that be an ERP system or a custom SQL database holding information about a plant or a set of assets. But alongside that, what Webalo lets us do is dip into the kinds of systems that are really more accumulating and presenting data in something like a stream, and whether that's something like a historian footprint in a local factory that's accumulating time series data, or whether it's something as scaled up and global in footprint as a Predix instance. Webalo gives us that ability to think about those users and their responsibilities and then build them the kinds of experiences that cross all those different kinds of boundaries. So for us, that was why we got very excited about the opportunity to bring Webalo into the portfolio, and today we're going to allow them to take on from this point and complete the introduction of the solution set to you. So without further ado, I will pass things over to the Webalo team and to Peter Price, who will begin that introduction.
Thank you, Sean, and good afternoon to all of you in the UK. Good morning here from California. I think we're just going to share the screen with you, so Sean, maybe you'll let us know when you can see our screen.
All right, looks like it's loading now, and it seems to be up.
Great. So what Lou and I are going to do, we're going to give you a high-level overview of Webalo. We're going to mix slides and video and a live demo, which is always exciting over WebEx. So let us know if you get any hold-ups or delays, and we can pause and backtrack and replay. But I'm going to kick this off with talking you through a bit about Webalo and what we're doing here. So Sean put it very accurately. Your world, the industrial internet world, as we call it today, is about machines. It's about data. It's about analytics of that data. But most importantly, from our perspective, it's about users too. And Webalo is very focused on users. We see ourselves as the user experience platform for the industrial internet. And we have a core technology, patented technology, which was designed to address some very specific needs from a user perspective. So users, as Sean also said, need to access all kinds of different data sources. And Webalo sits in between those data sources and the users and their devices, and we act on behalf of the user. Does the user need any information? Do I have to take any information for the user and send it to those back-end systems? How does the user interact with that world? We're about generating and managing those interactions with the enterprise on behalf of the user. And it's a platform that's been designed in a no-code, what we call app generation methodology. So we look at that data, we generate views of that data for the user, we capture data from the user, we write it back to the back end. And we've got a broad range of ways of connecting to data sources, which we'll talk about in a second, ways of mashing up those different data sources. But I think most importantly, the key factor about Webalo is that in focusing on those users, we can create dynamic user roles. We can attend to you and what it is that you need to action and visualize in your corporation to be able to get your job done and complete your workflow, your business process, whatever it is you need to do to complete the job at hand. Multi-channel deployment, so obviously we touch all kinds of different devices. We'll show you the Webalo experience today on the desktop, on a mobile device, on tablets too. And at the heart of all this, I always like to stress, is an enterprise-grade platform. So the bunch of us who've built companies like this before in the enterprise space have always done it in the context of large-scale enterprises and what is needed in terms of security, scalability, availability. This is a core platform that enables you to implement in your infrastructure. The driver for Webalo is really in two areas that we saw in the market and we see today. Firstly, companies have a lot of different data sources, all kinds of different data, legacy applications, new applications, everything in between. And for users, in doing their job, they need access to pieces of that data all of the time. The idea of a user being able to log into a single application and navigate their way through multiple screens to try and get something done is not really practical in the context of today's world and the way people work. Really what we need is we need access to multiple data sources, and we need that data organized for us. You know, the information that I want to see, the scorecard, the dashboard, the KPI, the workflow, the business process, whatever it is I need to do needs to be organized for me, and the data needs to come from wherever it sits or needs to go to whether it needs to be written back to, and I just want a single view of that information. And then secondly, alongside that, there's a real demand for simplicity. How can we organize this in the context of users who need to get specific tasks and actions done without it being a long, complex IT project? And so Webalo is all about moving the ability to generate these apps and create them to the operations department, to the people who need to get these things done, to be able to create this actionable environment in which they can work. So from a 50,000-foot sort of architecture level, if you like, this is Webalo. We sit either as an appliance that runs behind your firewall in a VMware or Hyper-V or Zen or similar type of environment, or in the cloud. We're an AWS multi-tenant architecture service, so you have two options for deployment. We deploy, as I said, across a variety of different device types, and we provide a whole range of different data connectors at the end. And let me just wrap up this part before we go to the first demo with how we fit into the GE Digital world. So Webalo is a GE Digital ISV partner. We've actually been a long-time partner with GE. We've had a relationship for a couple of years around a product called Prophecy Scorecard, which is an earlier version of Webalo available in the Prophecy market as an OEM product. And this year, we're launching a range of new products into the GE marketplace, an on-premise version integrated with all of the current BMS, and a full range of prophecy products. Also a cloud version of that. And we're bringing in Predix integration, so we'll talk about that a little later on. And as we go through the year, we'll be updating the Predix versions of what we're bringing to market, and also a variety of new versions, including our new desktop client, which we'll show you shortly. So I'm going to go over now and give you a quick overview of Webalo, firstly from an administrator perspective, so that we can show you, do you have the AW? Oh, yeah. There we go. So you should see on your screen something that says Start a New Activity at the top of the screen. And this is the Webalo administrative website. So this is what you use if you're an administrator of Webalo. And starting at the bottom, you have a lot of tools for managing the account, for training, tutorials, videos, getting access to support. All of that is built into the infrastructure, as is all of the capabilities for managing users, their roles, who gets to see what data, integrating with your existing LDAP platform, Active Directory, or whatever you might be using. As I said, Webalo is very focused on users, so there's a lot of ability to control who gets to see what information, how it looks on their device, etc. From the perspective of actually generating applications, Webalo basically provides a broad variety of different connectors. So we can provide a connection to existing web-facing applications where you can take the components of the web app that you have and reorganize it for delivery, say, to mobile users. Web services is a key part of our integration today. Obviously, everything we're doing in the GE world now is moving much towards REST services. Webalo has integrated web services connections, a broad variety of enterprise applications connectors. In fact, we've got over 50 different connections a broad variety of connections to over 50 different enterprise applications, databases, SQL databases, and then also reporting and dashboards as well, in connecting to those. So let me give you an example now by moving over to what is in fact our Q4 2017 desktop client, and then Lou's going to be looking at a couple of different mobile clients. So what you see in front of you is a view of a variety of different data sources. So across the top, I have my KPIs. So these are pieces of information that I'm tracking that are giving me key performance indicators about what's going on in my business. Below that, I've got a variety of different data sources that I'm connected to, which could be, GE data sources, enterprise applications, and at the bottom, I've got a set of real-time KPIs, real-time charts that I can track and view information around. So I get, as a user, my own personalized view coming from a variety of different data sources. You'll see in the top right-hand corner here, there's a notification. So I can click on that. I can view the details of that. So it becomes an actionable notification. I'm told there's a new order. I can pull up information about that. In this particular case, I can get the materials for that order. So let me explain the scenario here. I'm the production manager. A new order has come in. What I need to do is work out, can I produce that order with the current manufacturing setup? So I see this materials list. Maybe I want to check that against my inventory. So I can pull in the existing inventory that I've got. And I can actually mash up those two data sources. So I can drag my existing inventory over onto that order, and I can see side by side there the required quantity, the available quantity. I can see that I've got sufficient inventory to produce this order. Maybe I want to check my production schedule, and I look at my production schedule and I go, do I have staff availability for that? So same thing, I can pull in my staff schedule. Maybe I want to look at this by date, so I'll match those two dates and compare the different production schedule with the availability of staff and see that that matches up. And then I can go ahead and schedule that production to a particular date. And from there, what Webalo will do, so if you think about what's been happening, we've been looking at several different data sources. We've scheduled that production. We're sending that back to the system. It's going to update the order processing system and the production schedule and the staff schedule. So in summary, what Webalo is doing is it's enabling a user to see information that's relevant to them, that may be coming from a variety of different GE applications or other industrial applications or enterprise applications, and manage that information in a single view on their desktop. And I'm going to hand over to Lou. We'll go back to the slides and we'll talk about some of the use cases that Webalo are using Webalo for and how that visualizes across different devices.
Thanks, Peter. So I thought for this segment, I'd cover three different use cases that are examples of what people are trying to accomplish. Every company has a slightly different view of the data, different machinery and collector type of pieces of information that are available to them. In this particular case, it's a mining and minerals company, this multinational. They really wanted to get a better idea of getting some visibility on handheld devices and desktops as to what the operation was doing and getting some kind of standardized view across all the different lines, which have different equipment and have different productivity and production values. They chose to use Webalo to build a set of tasks that would give them production response over certain time periods, the equipment efficiency, production over 24 hours, runtime production, estimated production, based on some calculations that they had put together. They made them as runtime KPIs that would change colors as things would move on, and it enabled them to both get access to the data very rapidly, by connecting to Historian collectors and as well as to some of their plant app equipment, but it gave them a view as how to run the plant more efficiently by having this uninterrupted visibility into their process. The second case, the second case is around a packaged food manufacturer who has several high volume lines that are running 24/7, and it's running in high demand and highly constrained staffing to produce this product. It produces some snacks that people get frequently. The problem they had in this case was the pretty clear separation between IT and OT networks that prevented information about the plant operation from being seen very easily unless you had a VPN into the plant, in which case you couldn't get very much IT information from it. The background in this particular use case is they were getting their application data directly from MES, and they wanted to put together a clear picture in terms of what were the operational parameters in terms of these KPIs, these color-coded KPIs that they have here, and get access to shift production reports, efficiency reviews, downtime, and so forth, to be able to enable their people who are off-site and coming in for the next shift to have insight into what's going on so they can hit the ground running as they walk into the plant and have a clear understanding of all the events and downtime issues that they might be facing. The third one is a company that was not so much focused on the OT data, but is somebody who's in the beverage industry who is much more interested and had built a very complicated line information system up in the cloud using Azure technology to collect all and aggregate stuff for worldwide perspective about the line information, but they were more interested in having ability to mobilize some of the information associated with their ERP type systems, particularly SAP, different kinds of sources that they need to have access to in conjunction with their line information system. They want to be able to put these on the same device as they would be getting their operational information, and they wanted to be able to have a model that would make sense across all their different plants with all these different data sources. So what I thought I would do is take the next step. Peter did show you the administrative environment in Webalo, what we call the administrative website. This is the part that allows you to configure new applications rapidly. The process is relatively simple. I'm going to show a little example of it in a minute. But the basic process in Webalo is to use the agenda environment, which gives you a step-by-step layout of the things that you need to do based on whatever connector you choose. So your process will be to connect to data, to generate and customize the application directly, and that would effectively be ready to be deployed to devices. It's a secure system, so everyone gets whitelisted in to see the data, and then we deploy it direct to device. It's a little different than if you've ever done other application deployment through stores. Webalo service allows you to deploy directly to the device without having to go through the stores. And when you do deploy, you deploy to all devices. So we have cross-platform technology that allows you to just deploy once to all the different machinery. So setting this up, this is an example of actually constructing a task in Webalo. It happens to be that we're going to connect to a Predix data source, but it's just Predix data source is nothing more than a REST service. So here you see you start working in an environment. You pick the kind of connector you want. You're going to choose a RESTful service. It happens to be something that's going to be Predix time series. You put in the authentication information, and then that's your baseline. It's just like working an advanced REST client. You give it a name, you give it a relative URL against that API, you fold in your body information and header, and then you can execute that as a JSON request, see the schema, and then once you have the schema, decide what you're going to see. You can change the labeling. Do you want to make a KPI out of it? Or present it onto the screen. So it's a very simple process. Here you would go and just deploy it to yourself, and it would go out to the device and appear on the device. So taking that to the next level is, okay, I want to build a set of applications around this ability to configure a REST service. And, while the video is a little bit faster than real time, so we don't get too bogged down in all the clicking. The reality is those tasks can be configured by a novice in 15 minutes, by someone who's more expert in about 5 minutes. At the Minds and Machines show this year, we were presented with an interesting set of information from one of the partners, and let me just grab this device over here. The notion is, well, let's take that set of REST services that were built in Predix around a global operations system and see if we can design a dashboard around those 40 or 50 services that were created, and this is the result. And they were all configured exactly the same way you just saw moments ago. So we have the ability to create dashboards around at various levels. This happens to be data from a manufacturer of consumer goods. There are dashboards around global information. There might be dashboards at the plant level where you can compare your efficiencies, availabilities, and quality information. You can see I chose for a variety of different kind of representations, whether they be donuts or dials or just flat tiles. You can look at the information in side by side if you're looking at line-by-line comparisons, if you would like to do that, to see how one line is performing against the other. Or you can arrange them any way you'd like, quite frankly, if you just want to see the efficiency information at a global level, at a plant level, and at a line level, you can do that as well. Now, what we've done for demonstration purposes is, I'm working on iPad. I can work this with two thumbs effectively. I have the same information presented as tiles over here and color-coded KPIs that will update as the values come. You can choose as to whether you want a dashboard type view or a KPI type view to understand your information. These KPIs are actionable. You can drill down into them to say, well, if the global view is this, let me see a plant-by-plant view in chart form. We have all kinds of features that will allow us to see the information in chart form and comparison. This one happens to be comparing all 6. For the 4 metrics I've chosen, compare all 6, one against another. You have direct drill down capability to drill down and view that table of information, which happens to be these 6 plants, interacting with it with your fingers in a very natural way. You see a couple things. You see all the information available to you. We have these blue buttons, which we call related tasks, that call out other things that you can do in this context for this user, which happens to be notifications and maintenance orders. So in this particular case, I can see my items, where they're located. I can go drill down and access the notifications. It may ask me in that context, what machine are you talking about, and would you like to create a notification for that thing? And for this demo, I can submit that notification and write it back using a post method on that service. So this is an interaction that started with KPIs and dashboards. I can organize the information in a slightly different way. It's really a choice of the administrator that I might want to see the same plant table in a different way as a task. I can call it on demand as opposed to coming down through KPIs and get to that same information. In this case, I may have different types of related tasks that I want to look at. I may, in this particular case, want to go see a map that's out in Google. Where is this plant located? And drill down into it and get a view of that particular plant where it happens to be. I could, let me just dumb that out. I could, go do root cause analysis and take advantage of some of the facilities that Predix gives me to be able to walk the logical trees for that grinder, for that piece of equipment in that year, on that month, and walk down the tree to find out who was actually running that equipment. I can search all my alerts that happen to come in and drill down into them. So you can take the very simple configuration process and then create unique tasks, organize them on the screen as you might have as either KPIs, dashboards, specific tasks that you'd like to exercise, and push them onto a device. And if you push it onto an iPad, it will present it one way. If you push it onto a phone, it will present it in a different way, a different organization. So this is a very successful application. The whole dashboard series was built up in just several days as a way to visualize and mash up information that hadn't been seen before. So I'd like to talk about a couple of other applications just to give you a sense of some of the things that could be done. This happens to be done in a beer environment, a beer manufacturer. It's a scorecard application that lets the manager see different things about the business, whether it's business information, work orders. We're pulling information from, Historian. We're pulling information from SQL. We're drilling down into production type information. We're making assignments using forms and rescheduling directly from the device, writing directly back to the production systems, and be able to submit all that stuff from the device. One of the items that you might want to do is to take a look for reference information. Sometimes you might have documents out there in SharePoint. You need to go get some reference curves about how long do you have to pasteurize the beer before you can release it. This all has to be written into a compliance record for statistical process control. You can do that from there. We also have the ability to drill down into the time series data, just like we were configuring before. We have ways to present that in comparison type charting that's all interactive on the device using the controls that we provide. And then lastly, let's take a look at a longer process where you might want to have a sign-off on a compliance where you need to get statistical information off of Historian, go grab the values, and then have a sign-off process that requires a barcode, some input from the user that is signing off on it, particularly changing a username, and then write that back to the work order system. So you can have any process that you'd like to organize, the workflows that you need for user-first applications to eliminate paper processes and execute them in a sequence that makes sense for the operation that you have in mind. I'm just going to run one more to give you a sense. This is one that we worked with Kerrco on early last year, working just in for people who are interested in water type of applications. There were some reports that the folks over there at Kerrco done, and they want to look at on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, going to different parts of a particular operation. This one happens to be going out for this week's information from the condenser. The application that's feeding this information is an older application that happened to be on the web. We went out and used the web connector to go grab this information and present it onto the screen. Demo goes on and on for all the different sources of water and different reports that they're doing, but it gives you a sense that even if you don't have SQL database type applications or REST service applications, we still can extract information, extract mobile applications out of the structured information that you might have. So I'm going to turn it back to Peter and talk about, that concludes what I'm going to talk about in terms of showing you the product. We're happy to have a deep dive with you guys at any time if you have some questions, but I'll let him wrap up in terms of the product and how it positions in the market.
Thanks, Lou. So a couple of things to say at the end here that we haven't covered. I wanted to go back to the point that I made on the first slide about the enterprise-grade capabilities of Webalo. So we have built this as a platform that conforms and fits in with your IT infrastructure, that deals with the kind of security requirements you'll have, both in terms of user access and authentication, as well as device security and running in the right environments on the device. It's a scalable environment in terms of your users and the applications and how it grows inside your corporation. And it's built, as we've gone through and hopefully as you've seen examples of, to integrate with a variety of different data sources, device types, et cetera, that you have in the organization. So I'm often asked to summarize where Webalo fits in the context of other tools and products that might exist in your company. And I think of Webalo sitting in the middle of, on the one hand, reporting tools, and on the other hand, application development tools, sort of IDEs and SDKs and the like. So unlike reporting tools, Webalo is an actionable multi-data source environment, able to pull data from multiple sources, as we've shown you, display that data in a variety of different ways, and then action it as well. Allow the user to capture further information on their device, to interact through workflows and business processes with those variety of different data sources, to write data back to the back end. And then unlike application development tools, which tend to focus on IT-led projects, larger scale types of activities in building sort of cross-corporation, larger applications, Webalo is a much simpler self-service model that's focused on users and their individual needs and delivering to them the things that they need to do their job, which may be different from another group of users, which may vary from month to month. I may need certain information this month depending on what I'm doing, and that may change next month. We're creating that more dynamic user role environment that's simple to produce and to deploy. So, Sean, we're going to turn it back to you there. We'll leave it on the screen, which is some of the comments that we received this year from analysts and how they position us. Certainly they would summarize Webalo in the same context as the way that we've just summarized it. But Sean, back to you, and if there are any questions or however you want to handle next steps, let us know.
Perfect. And we do have a couple of things that are beginning to accumulate, so I'll pause for a second longer in case anybody else is typing furiously into the chat box to pass any questions over. I think, just as I pull back into presenter mode here, I would want to come back and just, refocus on something that both Lou and Peter made a point of, which was to look at, fast, speed. For me, I think one of the most interesting things about Webalo is the fact that you've got an extremely quick and extremely flexible way of being able to build those kind of cross-platform views. And so if you think about what we've always struggled with in our world is when you have a raw data source like a historian, you may have a lot of information in there, but then the question becomes how do you package it up for different users and serving their different needs and their different requirements. In other cases, you may have a situation where you've had something very structured, like a Prophecy OEE application or some of the broader I shouldn't say old, but the rebranded, I keep thinking of the old brand, but the rebranded GE, MES, or workflow applications, where what came out of the box was great to get your customer going, but as their needs change and as their requirements evolve a bit, then they may want to do something a little bit different, and they may want to present things differently or drive different behaviors. And again, with the speed, that you've seen in the demos today, you can see how quick it would be for someone to say, great, I can put an additional layer in place that is not just about giving you, an ideal set of views and functions today. It's something that we know that we can adapt over time as we need to do it. So how would we get started? I guess, philosophically speaking, the thing that I would ask everybody on the phone as they're looking at the different businesses that they work for to consider is, if you've had a pain point in being able to satisfy, a particular user or set of users with some important capabilities and visualization and reporting, I think that's a sweet spot for Webalo. I think where you've had difficulty keeping it either cost-effective to serve the need, or where as people have learned more about their operation, their needs keep changing, and the IT group runs the risk of becoming somebody's permanent report generation jockey, I think these are some of the sweet spots that you'd find for the Webalo solution. The second thing that we like to stress, you're going to get the most amount of value, following one of our favorite principles, which is make use of the data that you've already got and just think a little bit differently about the ways that it needs to be packaged up and presented. And then I guess finally, something that has become fairly clear to us here is that while it's a very, power user-friendly sort of toolkit in terms of the ability for somebody to mash up and make changes and build things out quickly, when you look at some of the use cases that were put in there, it does make sense to be thinking about ensuring that as you bring this into your organization, that you've got folks who are looking both at the IT and the enterprise layer in terms of understanding what data is available, as well as folks who come at it more from our traditional strength in the operational technology or automation and engineering layer. I think there's a lot of value waiting to be unlocked there where, because of the perceived barriers between those two worlds, people may not have put as much effort into trying to build those cross-layer applications or those cross-layer information deliveries that are going to actually deliver some of the greatest business value back to the organization. So I think with that said, I will leave up my contact information here. As I say, we've added Webalo to our portfolio, so for those of you who are used to knocking on our door for all things GE, you can now knock on our door for all things Webalo. I will quickly rattle through a couple of the questions that have accumulated in the chat box. For those of you who are typing away, whether you're sending it to public or what have you, I've got a few that have come to me directly here. And I will throw this one out there for Lou or Peter to pick up. Just somebody had asked the question, if we're looking at a cloud-based solution that can reach across a number of different IT layers and then potentially be, taking advantage of internet infrastructure for somebody on their phone, could you expand a little bit on the different ways that security is built into the system, both in terms of getting at data sources and in terms of keeping it secure as you're pushing out to different devices?
Yeah, so Webalo has a number of different built-in security mechanisms. In fact, if we need to, we could share a white paper about the whole security structure. But that first statement probably to make is that it's a secure system from end to end, and it's all whitelisted. So no one gets to see anything unless they are whitelisted in for any piece of information. between the client and the server. All information is encrypted, both in static mode and in transport. And then in terms of access, permission to access, we have it set up such that you could either access with an access account if it makes sense for a whole department to access information or groups to access the same information, or we could use either the permissions available from AD or permissions available from enterprise mobility management systems for a single sign-on to have access to data. So we're quite sensitive to making sure that no one gets to see anything that they don't have, and it's important that the way we design these things that it's user first, that you have access to the information that is specific to you and permission to see it.
Okay. And then the next one, I think I'm going to pick up this one. Somebody who's dealt with us for a bit, and the gist of the question is, okay, there's a lot of different, GE solutions in particular that they're looking at, and I guess they're just looking, essentially it's a question of, with things like WebHMI for the SCADA and things like Prophecy OEE and things like the Historian Analysis client, they're just looking for a little bit of a compare and contrast. So I guess, I'll take that one, and I'd say that, what struck us about Webalo was precisely the fact that, two things. So somebody made the point, there's a WebHMI for SCADA, and they certainly see that there's limitations to that. But from our perspective, we think this gives us an opportunity actually to say, look, we no longer have to bend and twist other applications or other toolkits out of shape. All right, so for example, I think we've all seen over the last 15 years that at the engineering layer, people have taken a tool like SCADA and tried to turn it into a dashboard and tried to turn it into a reporting tool, because for a long time it was really the only way to get at machine data reliably, and so the temptation then became to try and turn it into the data hub for everything, in terms of operational data. By the same token, historians opened up a new avenue for rapid accumulation of information, but, a lot of the focus there has been on the accumulation and the collection and the automation of some of the data processing, not necessarily on some of the data presentation. And then when you look at some of those other things that were mentioned, like the Prophecy OEE or the MES tools, yep, you absolutely could see some things today that might look like an overlap, but again, I think what we would want to look at and say is there a way to put that existing functional application like an OEE back in its box, for example, and say it can do what it does really, really well, but now we know that all that data is already nicely packaged and the event information is available. So if I do want to put together something that may be more of a mashup focused on somebody in a user role, and I think, for example, about somebody in a logistics management or a material management position, that person might find that just a light skimming of OEE data from that footprint put alongside some information about inbound shipments, put alongside some calculations about expected inventory consumption over the course of the day would be very useful to them, and it doesn't really present a use case where it would be appropriate to give them, the full depth of what an OEE or an MES client might look like. So I'd say that in each of those cases, what we're seeing is a scenario where Webalo lets us not bend other applications out of shape, let us not overserve a particular role or user with information that doesn't actually help them do what they're doing. And in the case of some of the footprint like a historian, where it really is a data source more so than a data delivery footprint, just, again, I come back to the speed and the flexibility for being able to present views and present information and integrate it into people's business processes. So another one that's cropped up that I think I will throw over the fence to Lou and Peter, and there's an implicit question there that I'll come back to, but let's deal with the first one here. Somebody had asked, okay, so you're reaching out to SAP, you've got access to potentially Oracle, Microsoft, various other things. Is there a suite of connectors or middleware tools, or is that all just wrapped into the basic, footprint and administrative toolkit that comes with the subscription?
Yeah, so this is Peter. Thanks, Sean. So, yeah, Webalo is basically that is built into the platform. There's a broad range of connectors that are built into the platform. Typically, with those enterprise applications, we're focused on one of two connectors. One is a SQL connector, if we're going to something like an Oracle database or a SQL Server database, use our built-in SQL connector. or, with an SAP environment, Oracle applications type of environment, other enterprise applications, we're using the REST service connector, which Lou showed you an example of in the Predix world. We're using that as the way to connect into those applications. So short answer is, all built into the platform.
Okay. And I think an implicit question in there was essentially a little bit about the licensing model and the commercials and such. So rather than get too far bogged down in the details, I think what I'll do is take the liberty of saying that Simon Perry from Webalo has been working with us, and we think that we're about to put a bit of what we'd call a startup offer into out to our customers, which would basically incorporate a footprint of 25 user subscriptions for their first year on board with the system, as well as a startup training and consulting package. And we think that's probably going to fall into the somewhat under £30,000 for that first year for those 25 users and the related services. So hopefully that gives people sitting on the phone just a sense of the kind of ballpark, table stakes for a medium-sized implementation that's going to serve a good quantity of people. And since most of the other things that are coming back to me essentially boil down to, hey, ping me afterwards, I'll pause for a second longer in case a more specific question crops up into the chat box. But I think that might actually bring us to the tail end of all the very focused questions and be leaving it more as a matter of a few people expressing some interest. So I think at that point I will thank everybody for joining us. I'm fairly certain a few of you have got small groups at the other end, so I appreciate all of you sitting tight and being a bit of a focal point in your offices for the interest in your organization. And we will get things like the white paper that Lou mentioned published up on our website. We'll get other information made available, and we'll ensure that everybody who registered for today's webinar gets that follow-up information in the next couple of days. So barring any last-minute questions, I think we'll bring it to a close. Thank you, Lou, and thank you, Peter.
Thanks for having us.